Do I have sound? I have sound.
I
How do you
have
know?
sound too. Oh, you're like fancy microphone and everything.
Well, not exactly fancy. Just you know, from
Fancier than me.
it's from an old life. I'm just finishing up my bag of chips here because actually I'm only recording sound, which is why I have this terrible background.
Oh, so you're not recording video.
Yeah, yeah,
That is awesome. Then I'll stop stressing about it.
yeah, and yeah, just finishing the bag of chips that I thought I would eat last night. And
Yeah, no worries.
problem about getting old is that past a certain hour, it's not about chips, it's not about beer anymore. It's just the bed calling you. All right, peoples, what's up? Me? Well, I just realized that being the host of this talk show, I don't mention my name very often. Well, my name is Claude Vien, or Claude Vines, as the Americans like to call me. I'm the light products specialist for a North American distributor based in Montreal, Canada, called AVL Media Group. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I'll be exhibiting at Expo Scene Trade Show in Montreal mid-April, that's 2022, and also Infocom in Vegas this June. If you happen to be in the area at those times, come say hi. And if you have a story to tell, well, we can certainly book a recording session and have you on the show. Just look for the AVL Media Group booth and you'll find me there. And if you're enjoying the Backstage Cowboys podcast, you can listen to it on your favorite platform, whether that be iTunes, Google, SoundCloud, Acast, etc., you name it. And soon it'll even be available on Spotify and Amazon. And please be sure to share it with all your friends and colleagues. The more the merrier. Or was that the more the drunker? Anyway. This episode will be a bit longer than usual, and you'll understand why when we get into the conversation. My next guest is none other than Pierre Marleau, owner of Orange Frog Productions in Calgary. Yeah, that's in Alberta, Canada. I say this because, not that I want to brag, but I've got listeners all over the world now. Pierre is originally from Montreal and has worked all over Canada and the US before landing in Calgary and starting his own company. We'll get right into it, right after this. The Backstage Cowboys podcast is brought to you by AVL Media Group and Avolights, who make the best lighting consoles in the world. If you live in Canada, you now have access to the Avolights Academy online learning platform. The cost is $229, and that includes an editor Avo key delivered directly to your door. Head on over to BackstageCowboys.com and click on the Avolights Academy logo to get all the details. Now, if you don't live in Canada, well, that means you're in another country. So if you're in the United States, head on over to avolights.us. Anywhere else in the world, just go directly to avolights.com and you'll find all the resources available in your country. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is another episode of the Backstage Cowboys podcast. Where's my drummer? Thank you for accepting my invitation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. We've been talking about it for a long time, and I'm glad that we're finally getting the time to do this.
Yeah, it's really cool. And we haven't we met a few years ago. Well, just before everything shut down, right? 2019.
Yeah, we were at the Backstage Access in Calgary, and we got to meet in person. And I think we've crossed paths many times over the years, but like I think this was the most official sort of connection we've ever had. So,
Well, yeah. And what actually brought me to you is your name
oh,
because
really?
yeah, Pierre Marleau in Calgary. I gotta find out. I mean,
Fair enough.
it's
Fair
it's
enough.
it's such a local name here in Montreal that this and that's probably going to be my first question. Pierre, where are you from?
Well, it's really funny these days. I tell people I'm from Alberta, but I was born and raised in Quebec, but I left there really early on. Like I was gone from Montreal in my early 20s, and yeah, and I've kind of lived all over the place. So yeah, I've spent more time in Alberta than I have in Quebec. So I kind of feel like I'm a true Albertan now.
Yeah, I suppose. And a nice place, by the way.
Yeah, no, I like it out here. Like, I mean, it's interesting how people and media and politics and all that, but at the end of the day, we got gorgeous mountains. People are nice. We
Hmm.
we have a pretty good life out here. So, we're into horses and all that stuff. So it's great little piece of country to be in.
Oh, definitely. I miss it. I can't wait to go back.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun for sure. And you know what? I don't think I could survive a Montreal winter anymore. Like, I think I do not miss the 10 feet of snow and minus 30s all the time. Like for us, for instance, in the past week, during the day, it's been +8, +5, and we're in February, right?
Wow.
So,
Wow. And
yeah.
yeah, and I know what you're saying because after this interview, what am I doing? Shoveling snow.
Yeah, I'm sure, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
and the fun part is that it rained all day yesterday, and overnight it froze, and then we got like 15 centimeters of snow. So I'll be
yeah.
shoveling snow on a skating rink.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember those days. That's why I'm saying, like, I don't think I'm built for that anymore. Like, there was a time I loved it and it worked great, but I cannot do that anymore.
I hear you.
Yeah,
So, Pierre, you're the owner of Orange Frog Productions in Calgary. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay, so which is obviously a production company. So you have audio, visual, video, and you offer turnkey services, I believe, right?
Well, we're sort of a couple brands put together. So you got it kind of half right. We're around rental outfits. So Orange Frog has a huge inventory of rental in this market. And we do rental and sales, and through the sales channel, that's how you and I connected.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have Orange Frog Design, which is a company that focus a little bit more on production and lighting design. So we do not own any video equipment. We're not a video or an audio company.
Okay.
We're purely a visual company. So
Oh.
for me, that was something that was very important. We're ultra specialized. And, I know a lot of companies my size tend to do it all. Their lighting and video and audio and all that stuff mixed together. But for us, at the end of the day, what we really care about is the design aspect. That's what get us up in the morning. And so even on the rental side of things, most of the things we purchase and most of the things I bring in for people to rent here are all very unique product that are more design driven than lining my pocket driven. So I don't always make the best choice from a business perspective, where I'm not buying the meat and potato stuff that could make me lots of money every day of the week. I'm the guy that goes by the odd and unusual stuff that makes the shows look very unique and very special. So,
Oh, that's cool because a lot of companies are about volume and about profitability. You're more about the artistic side of the thing.
100%. And even on the rental side, that's very, when people call us, like, we are supporting local LDs, like, as much as we do our own shows. I find now we're in a place where the shows that we do, it's with clients we've been with 10, 15, 20 years. But there's lots of young local LDs and experienced local LDs that are looking for, unique equipment and stuff. And I get phone calls all the time saying, like, hey, like, what do you have that's kind of cool I could put on my show for eye candy or for. So we've got lots of LED bars, and we've got stuff like lots of incandescent fixtures and things that are a little bit more architectural in looks, and things that look good on tripods and like that kind of stuff. So we love the set building side of things. Like, we're not building set, but we like when lighting can become a scenic component of the image. So
Great. Pierre, I have to ask, Orange Frog Productions. I mean, orange stands out, right? That I get. Frog, I mean, for me, for me, coming from where I come from and knowing that you come from pretty much where I come from,
Yeah.
I'd expect, like, I don't know, a French guy from Montreal that stayed out in the sun too long, or
Yeah, well, you know what? I basically, so I've had a very interesting sort of path that got me here. So, I'm just lucky to be in the right place at the right time. So I went to school to Cégep, and I was going to be a doctor. I went and
oh,
studied, I wanted to be either a microbiologist or be like a doctor, but maybe more scientist than like working on people. But and then when I was in high school, I did a lot of theater stuff, like everybody else. Helped the AV department. There was a
hmm,
guy there that needed help for grad and needed help for films and stuff, so I would stay after school and help him out. And so geeked out with him. And when I went to Cégep in Valleyfield, I saw that there was a company there called Valspec that was a touring house. Like, they brought in all the touring shows, all the comedian, the Celine Dion, the
hmm,
Luc La Rochelière, like all that stuff from the 90s when I was there, like late 80s, early 90s. And this will answer your question. It's just a little bit of a journey, but basically, I got accepted into med school and I got accepted into National Theatre School after working in that theater for 2 years while I was doing a Sciences Pure program.
hmm.
And talked with my parents, and they didn't care whatever I did as long as I was happy. And decided to go to National Theatre School. And then when I graduated from there, at that time in the country, there was a huge push. Like, the Mirvishes in Toronto and Livent were two big companies doing Broadway musical across the country and across the world as well. Luckily for me, one of my teachers at school recommended me for a position with Livent. And I became an assistant technical director and started working on those shows, and did that for about 6-7 years, where I made it from assistant technical director all the way to a production manager within the company.
Hmm.
And when you're asking me where is Orange Frog coming from, I was in Chicago and I was a production manager / technical director of Showboat, the second touring company, and we were putting that into that theater. And it's really funny when you grow within a company, like over time. You may get a better title, you may grow within the company, but people just remember you as the kid that started, 7 years ago. And what I found is that, I had some good ideas. I wanted to do some stuff, but I was really having a hard time getting the respect from my peers because my boss just kept seeing me as this kid. So I wasn't getting any sort of financial, I was still stuck at a very low rate, and it was kind of this weird thing. So I got really tired of all of that. And I got tired of having to always fight the system to try to do a better job. Like, I'm good at my job and I wanted to shine. And I just couldn't break through that ceiling. So I decided to start my own company, and people on the tour, because I was French Canadian, call me Froggy.
Of course.
So,
At least I
which is
got that
better.
part right.
Yeah. So, which is better than being called Pepsi and Yum Yum, or
Yeah.
Pepsi or May West, which was another one at the time. But yeah, I was called Froggy. And for me, why fight that? I thought it was endearing and it didn't bother me. So I was like, you know what, whatever company I'm going to open is going to have frog in it, because I'm a little French Canadian and in an English world. And then people were like, so you're going to be the green frog? And I was like, no, why would I be green? I've been in the business for over 10 years. I'm like, I'm not green, I'm orange. And that's how orange sort of happened.
Oh, that's it. So orange is the experience part.
It was, yeah, for sure. And then, funnily enough, years after, I realized that orange is a very creative color. When you do color analysis, orange is it's a color of creativity. So I was like, wow, how perfect! That makes a lot of sense. But so anyway, that's a little bit the journey on how we got to the name. Sorry for the long story.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I like to hear.
Good.
And I've seen your logo. I do see those little frogs on the wall behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the profile picture on your episode, we're gonna have to have that somewhere in there.
Oh, of course. Of course.
That would really be
We embrace
nice.
the frog. It's really funny. I keep talking about my guys, and I call them, because a group of frog is called an army. That's just like a flock of seagull, or
Uh-huh.
so a bunch of frog is called an army. So we yeah, like I've got my army of frog, and we go do shows, and we really like what we do. So
Any French speaking people in there, or are they all?
no, like right now it's pretty much all just English. But like it's like I'm here, so I can speak French when I need to. And but yeah, right now the whole team is pretty much Anglophone. So not a whole lot of theater people in Alberta, so that are willing to do stuff outside of theater. So so it's even that much more difficult to find theater people that speak French. But there certainly is a huge lack of personnel in Alberta, so it's difficult to find people, particularly these days.
Well, these days it's pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've lost so many great people like during this pandemic. Like so many great people just went, what do you mean? Like I'm going to go do something else, because we're all hardworking people, right? Like that's the thing. Like most people that were really hardworking and were ambitious and all that, like they just got tired of sitting around, and they went and either became electrician or became something and totally different, like took management courses, and now are working construction site and doing all these different jobs. So
Yeah, because what drives us in this industry is the passion.
yeah,
And if you shut down the industry and the passion is not there anymore, and it's just down to earning a living, then whatever.
yeah.
At this point, I can turn around and do anything I want. I had a dream last night that I was actually mopping the floor in a shop, and very happy to do so because I was well paid for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Eh,
Well, that's the thing, right? It's in our industry, like depending where you are and how it all works. Like you'll put in 20 years of not being paid very well. Like it's
yeah.
like I got to where I got, but at the end of the day, like I have put in hundreds of hours that were either volunteers or paid at very low rate, and do multiple jobs in a day to like you have to be a hustler, and you have to have ambition, and you got to have a direction of where you want to be if you want to be successful in this business, I think, for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's about going the extra mile and showing what you can do.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
but I understand the part about being categorized as a beginner or as a bad tech, as sometimes it'll happen. I mean, I've seen techs that were not that good for one reason or another. Either they weren't concentrated on what they were doing, or they were just inexperienced, or they weren't there yet in their attitude. And you kind of stay with that picture, and then you lose sight of these people for a few years, and then you meet them again in another context, and it's like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah,
Oh,
for
this guy's
sure.
in charge of. Wow. I mean, in my
For
head,
sure.
it's still that goofy tech that nobody wanted.
Yeah, for sure. And luckily for me, that wasn't the case. It was more that, like you start at a company at 21, and, and you're working for them. And next thing you know, you're 27, 28, and you go, I've been with you for a long time. And all the people that are working for me at that point are making three times my salary. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It's not sustainable anymore. But people have a hard time sort of, they'll put you in the role and you do the job and you deliver. And if you fail, there'd be consequences. But it was just really hard to get out of that stigma. And I mean, I work with amazing people. I was so lucky to be there at that time, that young, and to be exposed to that level of knowledge and experience and expertise. Like I'm still in touch with a lot of my mentors from that day, and those people ended up at Shaw Festival or at
Hmm.
like all around the world, and some people are still at um, yeah, like just on Broadway and all over the place, which is really cool. So
Well, you have friends everywhere.
well, like all of us, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't get to be my age without having some baggage along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Um,
meet a lot of people, you travel, you're in different theaters all the time. So sometime when I talk to people about what I've done in my life, people go like, what are you, 127? But the reality is we live such a fast paced life where one day you're meeting the queen, and the next day you're working with a band, and the next day you're doing a different thing. So yes, you've worked for hundreds of different bands, and yes, you've worked on a bunch of different musicals and all that kind of stuff, but it's because we're all working 2-3 gigs at the same time, and things are overlapping, and it's pretty crazy what our lives look like when you're really involved in it. If you take this job like working at McDonald's, it's a very different thing. But if you're passionate about it and you never have enough, and it becomes your dream and your passion, then yeah, like it's amazing the amount of work you get to do in a year.
Yeah, and it's called work because it's the typical name for something that you do for money. But it's way more than work. I mean, for me, it hasn't been work in the past
Right.
25 years or so. I mean, I remember when I started, I was wiggling some lights for a kid's party, and I was thinking maybe I should like be earning a living or something. Oh yeah, I'm paid for this.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, for sure. We're pretty lucky. For me, what I find amazing is like if I think of all the place I've been that most people don't have access to, like you get to walk on roof of building, like I've been on top of the Parliament building in Ottawa, walking the roofs out there and setting up laser bounce mirrors for shows. And like you just think of all these different places where I was in Tel Aviv and control towers of runways that were connected to our theater, and just like all this kind of stuff where you go, it's amazing the things you get to see and experience that most people walk by every day and don't. Like we all see doors that says like interdit de rentrer, like you can't go in. And
Yeah.
and then you just a lot of people don't even wonder what's behind there, but we get to go behind those doors all the time and take the secret elevator and meet secret services and meet government official and do all those different things that most people don't get to be exposed to. So that to me is what really turns me on, gets me excited. I go like, oh my God, like, what did you do today? Like, the first time I called my mom and said, hey, I met the Queen today. And when I was alone with her, she actually talked to me. Like, that was pretty freaking amazing. Like just a young kid, and you get to stage manage the Queen in Ottawa for Canada Day, and, got to spend some time with her. And I was like, wow, that was something special. And then 20 years later, get to meet her again, like it's just one of those things where you just, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of feel like Superman at one point because I remember, well, all the tours. You go into this venue through the back door, and then you walk in through the ceilings, and you go through all the walls and all the secret places, like you were saying, and then just before show, doors open, and in come the mortals. Those who have limited access.
Yeah, totally. That's it, right? Limited access. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, it's
so it's hard, right? Like I know for me, like when my wife says, hey, let's go see a concert, I'm like, well, do I know somebody on the tour? Because I don't want to come through the normal doors and go sit in my seat in the balcony because I didn't know anybody to get me a better seat. I want to sit at front of house. Like I want to, and that's part of the challenge, right? Like it's really hard to go back to being immortal.
Yeah, I especially like the feeling of starting the show, and you're sitting in the middle a lot. Sometimes the regie's in the middle of the room, so you got people all around you, and so you got people that are looking at you, and obviously nothing else is happening in the room. And now you're about to press a button, and then the lights go down, and then you talk to somebody on the clearcom, and then you hit another button, and then boom, everything starts. And man, I'm God Almighty. I'm doing this show. I'm the one that's making it happen. And 99% of the people in the room don't know I exist.
No, of course.
And I'm good with that.
Me too. It's one of the first thing I learned, like when I was working in that cégep, like as a tech. I had a mentor there. His name is Michel Raymond, and I haven't talked to him in years, but he's the reason why I went to National Theatre School, and he's the reason I'm in the business today. Like he sort of took me under his wing and taught me everything I needed to learn, like at that time. And I remember one of the first show I got to do was, like Cégep they have these singing competition, like where like all these different schools get together and
Cégep en
young.
spectacle.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So I got to do a cégep en spectacle, and I was at the console in the middle of the auditorium, and it's a 1,000-seat auditorium full of my peers, all kids, and And these bands are going, and I couldn't see because people are standing up, and the desk was, like down. And I don't know, at the time, like the desk I had was like a Lightboard M or something like that, like some old Strand, new Strand at the time. But anyway, I found myself putting the chair on top of my table and the desk on my knees so I can see above people's head. And then I was a rock star, right? Like I was just having the time of my life doing the show and all that. And then once the show was over, my boss kind of grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, and he was, hey, like, you got to calm down. Like, you're lucky to be a part of this, but this is not about you. Like, this is not about you being a rock star. And it really stayed with me. And then he was like, when we do a show and stuff, because I found myself a few times, like you finish the show and you're in the booth in the back, and then you open the door so people can kind of see you, and you stand there proud. And he was like, no, close the door, turn the lights off. Nobody needs to see you. Like, if you do a good job, you're like SWAT. You come in, you do your thing, you walk out the door, and nobody ever knew you were there. And that to me is that was one of the most, this was one of the most important lessons. And I think with all my guys and with Orange Frog here, we're the same way, right? I constantly remind my guys that we're a SWAT team. Like, we are invisible. We go in, we do what we need to do. If there's a problem, the client will never know. We'll fix it. Like, if the client knows, we failed. Like, it's important that we just deliver whatever needs to happen, and life is all good. So,
yeah, being invisible is part of doing our job right.
Yeah, and I think it's so empowering. I know for a lot of people, if you have a huge ego, it's hard to take. But, like, there's such an empowerment in knowing that you did all this and nobody has a clue. Like, I think it's pretty amazing. And we don't live in a world like that anymore, right? Like, now it's all about YouTubers. Like, so now if you're a console programmer, like, it's funny, all the young people I meet these days, like, they've got their three, like, programmers they watch on YouTube, and it's all about that. And you're like, okay, but this guy does EDM on a large scale. How does that relate to what you're doing today? And it's important to learn from people and all that. But I find people have lost a little bit that aspect of being invisible and being behind closed doors and being humble about your job too, right? Like, because there's a big part of it is, when you start being bigger than your britches, like, I don't know that you're as good as you can be when you take a minute to be humble and just focus on the work and not on the glory. Because the glory is very, I don't know, it comes and goes. It was never a thing for me. I never cared about it. So,
yeah, well, the glory kind of belongs to whoever's on stage.
Absolutely.
And the way I see it is that if people don't know I exist, but they think that the artist is doing magic.
Yeah.
That means I'm in perfect sync with what the artist is trying to deliver, and I'm just amplifying that, adding
that's exactly it.
Effects, colors, lights, whatever, and that's when the magic happens, and we're kind of the secret services behind that.
That's exactly it, right? Like, we're the gear that make the machine work. Because you can watch a concert without lights, without good audio, without good video support, any of that. The experience is so different. I mean, you can see it with fireworks, right? Yeah. Like, the day they started doing fireworks to music, suddenly it went from being a cool show to an experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you take different discipline and you merge them together to create an experience. That's where you start to have a machine that emotionally, I just talk about it and my little hairs are going straight up on my body. But, to me, like, that's where magic happened. Like, when suddenly it's not about ego, and you've got like a video designer and a lighting designer and an audio designer and an artist, and we all get to talk together, and and we come up with a concept, we come up with something that is powerful. And when that moment happened, the light changed, the audio cue happened, like the audience it's just the audience lose their mind. And I find, like, I do mainly corporate shows these days. Like, that's where the bulk of our stuff is. So we do corporate shows and we do experiences, like, and the experiences will be like a project for a zoo, or a project for somebody who's trying to do an interactive sort of experience. But when it comes down to corporate shows, I find that we've kind of lost our soul a little bit. Not Orange Frog, not my company, but I think as an industry, most people in corporate, it's all about how many road case, how many screens, how many speaker, how many lights can I put on the show.
Yeah.
And it all becomes this battle. So you end up with a bunch of suppliers sitting around a table, and everybody is trying to see like who can get the biggest chunk of the pie. And it's very unfortunate because the client loses. The client, like, we're not doing what's best for the client anymore. We're all doing what's best to line our pocket. And that, I think, is something that's very unfortunate that is happening. And most of your listeners are probably going to go, this guy, I'm not listening to him anymore. But it doesn't matter. It's the reality. Is I find it really sad when, the money becomes more important than the experience. I think if you deliver the experience, the money will come.
Well, I'm glad to see that, because you're a living example that creativity and passion will allow you to earn a decent living.
Absolutely, hands down.
And you don't have to be a numbers guy all the time and pull the blanket on your side. Besides, I think if everybody joins in and everybody brings their expertise to the table and do what's best for the client, I think there's a part in it for everybody.
For sure. But it's really challenging when companies get to be so big and they're controlled by mutual funds or banks or all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Suddenly we're not in the entertainment industry anymore. Now we're in the banking industry. Now we're in the mutual fund industry, and returns have to be there. Yeah. And suddenly it's very hard to justify buying the latest and greatest equipment, or buying equipment that will only go out 10 times a year, but on those 10 times, it's going to make these shows look amazing. It's funny, as we are interviewing for new people joining our team are saying, we're tired of working for companies that we don't know the owner, or there's 10 owners, or there's 20 owners, or there's a board of director we got to deal with. We want to be able to come to somebody and say, hey, like, I saw this really cool thing. Can we do it? And then here we're able to do that, because I just, I kind of look at a project and I go, yeah, let's do this. This is going to be cool. This is going to be great on Instagram. This is going to be, this is going to be great for our client. And so we approach it differently, but there's such passion that when you can talk to a client with passion and get them excited about their project, it's amazing how suddenly the budget that used to be $20,000 now is 35, and they managed to find an extra 15. But if you become about a gear list, like, so, if you go, well, here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to have like a DLP3 and a Seat 9 and a blah, blah. The client rolled their eyes and go, I got $5,000 for you. I don't know, figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've done that before. I mean, with the 3D visualizing.
Yeah.
And they like, I was doing this wedding once, and they wanted a big entrance and everything. And so I put something together, like a 3D rendering of the light show when the newlyweds walk in.
Yeah.
And they're looking at that, they're just freaking out. That's our light show? Well, not exactly, but if you add another like $5,000, that's what you're getting.
Yeah.
And you'll get it for sure. I mean, it's an emotion.
It is, for sure.
Yeah, and which brings the next question that I didn't have 5 minutes ago, but you kind of pushed it on me. Like, guys like you, passionate guys like you, who are creative and who care about the experience. What are the chances that eventually disappears and is all bought out by all these huge companies, which is pretty much what seems to be happening nowadays?
Yeah, well, like anything else, I mean, if somebody wants to buy me out, like, I can give you my phone number and they can come buy me out for sure. Like, it's, that's always an option. But in the meantime, it's certainly not the focus. I think for us, ultimately, for me, is I will always be creative. I will always be passionate. And I will always find an outlet for that to ooze out of me. Like, that's just the reality, right? So right now, the outlet is lighting design, and it's lighting equipment, and it's making sure that we provide in Western Canada a very unique experience. It being dry rental of gear that is very unique, and that you cannot get at Christie Light, or you cannot get it, wherever. Because in Western Canada, really, like, who is there when it comes down to get lights? There's Christie Light, which is in Vancouver, and we're in Calgary.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's a few people that have Christy Light gear on their loading dock, because that seems to be the new tendency, is to get like long-term dry rental of Christy equipment for you to sub-rent. But if you are looking for something that's not part of the Christy Light catalog, and the Christy Light catalog is awesome, like there's lots of great things there. But if you're not a Martin guy, if you want to play with Very Light, if you want to play with Roby, if you want to play with, JB Lights, if you want to play with anything else, Ayrton, like whatever. And on purpose, I'm not throwing your brands in the mix just so people don't think I've been bought out. But, there's lots of different products that we carry, that we have, that makes us unique. And then from a design perspective, I'll be designing my entire life. And if it's not in this environment, it'll be in something else. I'll go be an interior designer, or, I love farming. Like we have 80 acres of land that we farm heavily, and we have horses and chickens, and I've got bees, and we do all that stuff. Maybe I'll go be passionate about all that stuff. But I don't think that passion is something you turn on or off. I think it's something you either have or you don't have. I meet a lot of people that don't have it. Yeah. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, some people aren't passionate. They're just rational. They're just doing what needs to be done, but and putting their personal, their personal ambition aside, and just doing what needs to get done.
Yeah, I have to say though, like it's super important to have all kinds of people. Like if I look in my business, I've got people of all kinds of different sort of background. I've got some people that are super analytical and that can do plots and figure out all the, cable lengths and weights and all that stuff. And I don't do that anymore. And for me, like, I'm the guy that's like floating up here with crazy ideas and stuff. And then I've got these specialists that are really good lighting techs that can sort out through all of that and make the technology work and stuff. And they're passionate about that. That's their passion, is to come up with a way to trigger something remotely, or how to program. Lots of it's really funny. Everybody thinks that programmers are designers and that programmers are creative. There's a lot of programmer out there that are extremely good analytical, like the way their brain works. I remember working with one of my very first programmer, because I never really programmed for myself very much. I was always very lucky to have programmers around me. And he was saying, I like working with you because you have no idea how to program and you make my life hell, but the shows look really good. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And he goes, well, he's like, for instance, this device, like 6 lights go on a power supply. You'll keep designing 7. He's like, you know how much of a nightmare that is? And I'm like, well, no, you never told me. He's like, yeah, that's my point. And he's like, I'm not going to tell you because your show looked good, but it's a pain in the neck to tech. And that's the thing I find, is that, being a little bit sort of in my bubble doing what I do, but having guys that are very passionate about making my design happen, it really makes for unique proposal, instead of suddenly everything is the same and everything is,
Oh, yeah. I know exactly what you mean. And I had a tendency to design with all the technical aspects in mind. And that was my challenge. I'm going to try and make this look good. I'm going to try and get the effect I want using the technical logic that's going to make it easy up, easy down. And a no-brainer for the technical crew, which is the part of us, the part of our people that like to deal with equipment rather than people.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and we kind of we're great together. I'm kind of hybrid. I do both.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, like, I'm not a total flake. Like, I'm not saying I'm a total idiot and I don't know how the technology works, because I do know how the technology works. And I was a technician for a pile of years. But when it came down to programming on, like, by design, I did not want to learn to be the best of programmer, because every programmer I always work with, there's a moment in the middle of the night where they look at me and they go, are you kidding me? You want me to do that? And I'm like, yeah, that's what the song calls for. Like, I need it to do this, and that. And they're like, that's going to take 4 hours. I'm like, okay, well, then I'll see you at 6 a.m. and then I'll, come back in 4 hours and you can show it to me. And they're like, you're kidding, right? I'm like, no, I'm not. That's what the song calls for. But if I was a programmer and I was on the desk, I don't know, would I spend the 4 hours?
You'd probably compromise.
yeah, I'd probably compromise and take the shortcut, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there's a guy that's being paid to do that, and he loves doing that work. He's just, like my programmers have always been like, hey, like doors is in 6 hours, so we don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
And then I'll go, okay, well, that's the intention. How do we get there? Like, how do we not have a train wreck, and how do we get from A to B and make it look close to that? And then they put their thinking cap on, and then suddenly it doesn't become about a show file that they've had for 10 years that they keep triggering the 12 same effect all the time, because that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
After a while, you just keep reloading the same show key and you keep using the same 12 tricks that you've had for a long time. And that's a problem, right? Because after a while, everything looks the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that feeling. I try not to program as much as
Right.
possible, or at least when I do start a show, I always start with a new file. I mean, a lot of my friends have a lot of stuff built already, and they import that, and then they work from that.
Right.
I try to avoid that, and in the end, I more often than not, I wound up programming pretty much the same thing I was programming on the other shows. So I understand what you mean. I mean, if you start with the creative part and then you work out the technical part, you're not getting the same result.
Right. Right. And I get that. Like, I get what you're saying. Again, there's awesome programmers and there's all kinds of situation, right? Like most of the time, we're always thrown to the wolf, where you're asking a programmer to do miracles in 2.5 hours before
Mm-hmm.
doors, and it's like, how is that supposed to happen if you don't have a bag of tricks ready to go?
Yeah.
I've just been lucky to be part of projects where we had 2 weeks to program a show or 5 days to program a show, and then you go, okay, well, let's not lean on the good old tricks, and let's see. And don't get me wrong, I have my own tricks that I like using all the time, my go-to default stuff. So
Yeah. That always
yeah,
does the job, right?
for sure.
Yeah, luckily, technology is bringing us a lot more tools and a lot more solutions to get the impossible done in a
Yeah,
timely
fair enough.
fashion,
Yeah,
and I'm very grateful for that. And I was in my last interview, I was talking about the latest integration of video and lighting, and with the Light Synergy thing, that you can actually run video through your lights
yeah,
in a cinch, like in seconds.
yeah.
And in a few occasions, I've had the occasion, well, on a movie set, you run a burning building through your lights. There's your effect.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And
So
that's great. That's awesome stuff for sure. Like to be able to do like data merge with video and that kind of stuff is really awesome for sure.
yeah.
And we've been using that. It didn't used to be easy to do. Like it used to, involve
Hmm.
lots of technology to get there. But you're right. It's getting those two medium. I think it's one of the things, more and more video and lighting are becoming one. And I think people are starting to treat them a little bit more like that, especially on concerts. I think in the corporate world, there's still two very separate sort
Yeah.
of world that don't talk very much. But I think on concert, you see that merge happening more and more.
Well, the thing is, with concerts, it's a lot of pre-prod and then it's cut and paste. Whereas corporate events are a one-on-one thing. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of energy being put in the content, but delivery is still pretty much straightforward. I mean,
right.
you can have an elaborate LED screen setup or projection setup, but you're not necessarily going to incorporate lights with that. So you're using lights to light, and you're using video to show stuff. And I don't know. I guess that at some point there will be some integration because it's so simple to synchronize nowadays.
We've done quite a few corporate shows where like there's a big opening number, and they spent all this money on a video on 100-foot screen, and then I go,
Mm.
hey, video guys, can you just send me the signal, and then we bring it into our world, and then we use that as data points to turn the lighting rig into an extension of the video, like you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty amazing the impact of that, because then you look like you program like for 6 weeks this crazy lighting show, especially if you've got like a couple hundred movers
Yeah.
on an opener, and then you just you do spend the 2-3 hours mapping everything. But once everything is mapped and then you start running the video signal through it, like suddenly, like the hits are being hit where they need to be, and like you
Hmm.
don't need time code, you can just run it through, and it's very impactful for
Yeah.
sure. And from a design perspective, I think that's where the future is. There's no doubt about it. We spend our days watching the Avengers and Netflix, and where when you think about what it is we do for a living, like in the corporate world and in theater and in rock concert, like the amount of money that is being spent on movies, it's like a factor of 20, right? Like, so
Hmm.
if you're spending $1 million on a concert, you're spending probably $100 million on a movie. But people watch movies all the time and television all the time, and that's the pacing that they're used to. So, if you don't see 31 explosion in the first 5 minutes, like the film is boring,
Yeah.
like most of the time, especially in action. So, and then we have to compete with that on a corporate level, or on, because those are the reference people have, right? Like
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
that's what they know, like that's what's exciting. So you're constantly having to try to deal with that level of cocaine, and you're just, you're not at the same level at all.
Yeah. Luckily, with all the new technology, video is being controlled at the lighting position, which
Right.
means you're not asking for a video feed. You're actually uploading the clips from the lighting console,
For
and
sure.
mapping happens in a cinch,
Yeah,
because
for
it's
sure.
it's so easy to map out nowadays. So that's the part I like. That's the part where I got the clips,
Yeah.
and I'm uploading them from the lighting desk to the
Yeah.
video server, and I
Yeah.
got control.
Yeah, fair enough. Again, that is a battle though, right? It's like it's a control that is hard to get. Like it's not everybody is willing to let go of that control, for
Of
sure.
course.
And not everybody is willing to spend money on content. And
Hmm.
that's the other thing for me, particularly in the corporate world, is like I see 100-foot screen being sold all the time to corporate clients, and then what
Nothing
do we
on
do
it.
with it? Two picture in picture and the logo of the
Mm.
fundraiser in the middle.
Yeah.
And you go, why did we spend all this money on that? Like it just seems so, if you're going to spend that kind of money on a 100-foot video screen, then double your budget and spend, as much as you're spending on the technology, spend on content. So at least you're using that content for, and again, this is not me talking as a lighting designer, but more as a designer, period.
Hmm.
It's just, if you're going to invest into the technology, invest in the experience, make it something. But let's not just make it a giant square box with, picture in picture on each side. Like, what's the difference between that and two 9 by 16 screen on each side of the stage?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So,
I was looking at your website. There's a couple
uh-oh.
of things that I noticed that got my attention, and that first, you have blog posts in there, which I find really really cool. I like when I go to a website and I see there's a blog there. I like it because it's the human behind the corporate, you know.
Right.
So you really see what's in there, and I see there's a post called "People Behind the Spotlight." Thank you. Tell me about that. I mean, I read it and I have emotions.
Well, why don't you tell me more about, like, how it, like, what it meant to you? Because for me, like that I find that fascinating. We do generate a lot of blog posts. In the past 2 years, we've been pretty quiet because the industry has been quiet.
Well, yeah.
But we generate a lot of blog posts, and I always think that I put them out there and nobody reads them. So it's fascinating for me to hear somebody say, "Hey, I really like it." So why did this one draw you in?
Well, it's exactly it reaches the mission of Backstage Cowboys.
Okay.
So, Backstage Cowboys slogan is exposing the rear end of show business,
Right.
which means we're actually taking those people that are invisible on show day, or during the performance, and out of context bringing them forward, because I think a lot of people want to know what's going on backstage. They don't want to necessarily know it during the show. They
Right.
want the magic. But in between shows, a lot of people want to see what's going on backstage, and
For
and
sure.
how's all this coming together.
For
And
sure.
and there's real people behind it. And what's funny is that it's maybe not as much today, but there was a time where it was sort of a taboo job. When I went to school, there was no option for, doing anything backstage. I'm sure there was at a certain point, but I was not exposed to that. There was an auditorium. There were people fiddling around with stuff, and that's about it. So I mean, there may be one or two geeks, after school playing with projectors and stuff, but that was about it. But nobody really told us we could make a living out of this, and this was a serious job.
Yeah.
So bringing all this world forward and showing people that we're a lot of people. There's the whole community, and we're all doing this for a living, and we're earning a decent living.
Mm-hmm.
And the stories behind it is just amazing. So that's why when I read your blog post, I mean, it's something that I'm pretty sure I can find something similar on the Backstage Cowboys website. Which
nice. Well, yeah, I think for us, for sure, like we like to celebrate the unsung heroes for sure. There's lots of people that do amazing work that nobody knows are around. When I married my wife, she comes from a military family, and I really like it's once in a while we'll get to sit down and you hear these stories, about being in Afghanistan or, doing this or doing that, and it's all these things that us mortals have no idea what, like when my father-in-law, before he passed away, would tell me stories, like he built all the runways up north, like, so for NORAD and all that. So he was building ice runways, and you hear the stories of, landing C-130s on thin sheets of ice and the different things that they did up there. And it blows your mind. So, and it's amazing. Like so many Canadians would love to know these stories, but they never will, because it's all stuff that's done behind closed doors. So for me, like that was an opportunity, this blog, to just kind of share a little bit of that and let people know that there's great people behind there. And if you just scratch a little bit, like, and you ask the right way, you might get to know a little bit more about that side of life. So.
Yeah, well, I thank you very much for publishing that, and I'm going to throw out an invitation. People, go see orangefrogproductions.ca. Just poke around the site. I mean, it's worth it, really. It's really cool.
We're in the process right now of redesigning the site, because it's a little old and it's a little bit of a patchwork right now. We played in there during the pandemic, trying to figure out what we wanted the website to look like. So we're going to be coming up hopefully in the next like 4 or 5 months. It takes a while to just kind of put your thought together, especially, with the rental business being the way it is and the design business being the way it is. Like, I think, defining those identity, but it's great for me to know that people are reading the blogs. Then I will get back and write some more. It's funny. I have one that I've been working on, and it's kind of sitting in the gate, and I was debating if I should publish it or not, because I think it would upset a lot of people. But then again, I'm French and I'm me, so I upset people. It's what I do. But yeah, I wrote this article about, post-pandemic, designers will have to be somewhat smart about how they approach shows, because pre-pandemic, I think we were in a run where it was all about the latest and greatest. So fixtures were coming out every 2 weeks. Like there's every LDI, there's more and more, new, different, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's all the same, right? Like it's a fixture that can either do a gobo or a wash that is projecting an image or a texture or a color. And I think successful designers in a post-pandemic world, I personally think, will be people that will be able to use legacy equipment to make their show look good. Because to be honest, if you can go and get 20 moving lights to do your show, in my book, I will take 20 moving lights over 5 of the latest and greatest lights out there. So, but a lot of people, because a lot of programmers and a lot of designers are gearhead, all they want is the latest toy to play with. But for me, I want quantity. Like, give me 100 of something. Like, you can give me 100 Martin Mania if you want. Like, I'll do something with that because I got 100 and I can do something with 100.
Yeah.
But give me, a few years ago, everybody wanted Vipers. That was the thing. Like everybody was like, oh, give me Vipers, Vipers, Vipers. Well, if I have a choice of having 6 Viper on a show or having 24 VL 2500, which are old beat up fixtures, but still spit out color and still have, gobos and great optics. And well, then why would I not use 24 lights? And that was just my approach. And I think that's been the key of our success from a design perspective, is just not being gearhead, not being focused on the gear, but being focused on the image.
Well, I kind of had that mentality before. I often said, shops were always have the older gear sitting at the back of the shop that nobody wants.
Yeah.
And then you got the newer stuff that goes out all the time. And I always said, give me the back of the shop.
Yeah.
And put some talent behind the board.
Yeah.
And we have a show.
Yeah. 100%.
And a producer once told me moving lights are for people who don't have imagination.
Well, I think that's...
Well, he was an old guy.
Yeah. You know what? There is a real divide, though. Like, if you think about anybody who was in the lighting business pre-1995, like, those are Parcan and dimmer guys.
Yeah.
And, and I was there at that time. And I have to say, to adjust from being a Parcan and dimmer guy to becoming, now lighting is about networking, is about moving lights. It's about data merging. It's about, all this stuff. You almost have to go do a year of networking schooling these days to know, how do I configure my switches and how can I run redundant snakes and all those things, which years ago we didn't have. I was there when AMX was around, and, AMX 192 and then DMX came out. That was revolution. And we had to adapt to that and change from analog cables that were this big. And, I think my first desk, and it's funny, I just sold it at auction 3 weeks ago. My first desk was an Avolite Roller Q 96 or something.
Yeah.
I used to love that desk. It was 6 feet long. It was buttons everywhere. You looked like a rock star. It was awesome. But you ran analog 96 pin connectors to the back, and 3 of them plug in there, and little pin patch in the drawer. And now it's all now it's complicated. It's computers, and your backup is actually an on PC version, and you've got switches merging data and all that stuff, and distributing. You've got ArtNet and ACN, and you've got all these things where and I'm talking the talk, but I don't walk the walk. I've got people these days that can connect all this stuff, because I'm obsolete now. Now I'm focusing more on design and less on the integration, because I can't do it all, and it's so complex now. But yeah, I think in the right hands with the right people, I don't even know what we were talking about, but in the right hands with the right people, I think moving lights and technology can be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, but we're about the same age, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, moving lights and all those latest effects and all that, really cool. I agree. I love it myself. If I just say 6 racks of ACLs, does that excite you? It excites me.
Of course it does.
I miss
it. For sure. Well, there's no doubt. And that's the thing, right? I think that's the gift that we have, is that, guys like you and I, we have lived through all those different eras. I would hate to be somebody these days that comes out of a school and that doesn't, I find it's a conversation I have with school teachers all the time, and with people that are joining our industry as well, is when I was a kid, mentorship was a huge thing. So for me, one of the first concerts I saw was Rush. And I remember researching who DLD was. And then I figured out it was Howard Hungerleiter. And I was like, I need to work for that guy. I need to be around that guy. I want to, I was blown away by what he did. And within 3 years, I managed to become a tech on for his laser company. He used to have a company called Laser Light Effects, and went to work for Howard. Does he still have it? Well, I know he's PDI now, and we still talk once in a while. But yeah, Howard, and it was his birthday not that long ago. Happy birthday, Howard. But I was like, this guy is amazing. And just being around him and watching him be so musical, and, there was something about being able to learn from him. So guys like you and I that have lived the Parcan era, and I've lived the moving light era and the video era and all that stuff. Hopefully, we're smart enough to take all these bits, put them together, and then create very unique looking shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, if all you've ever known is, like, I don't know, like LED fixtures, like, it's funny, everybody like LED fixtures everywhere. Well, to me, the quality of light is not there. Like, I still use incandescent LECO, and yes, they draw more power, and yes, they're a pain in the neck, but the rooms look amazing. Like, you can get beautiful oranges out of them. You get this beautiful iridation when you throw gobo in and you throw it out of focus. And like, there's all this stuff you could do where the quality of light is awesome. And then you take, like we sell lights we're dealer obviously for lots of companies, and we get called into theaters, and then shootouts happen all the time. Mm-hmm. And it drives me insane. You got a bunch of people with meters and flat field and all that stuff. So unless you're shooting something that is super precise, like an election night where it's for television and it's got to be boring and flat and lit the same way everywhere. Okay, I get why you might want that. If you're in a theater and you're out there with like a meter and all this stuff, first of all, what's the difference between 21,000 lumen and 19,000 lumen? Can you tell me that people can actually see that in real life, especially if you don't have the other light right next to it, right?
Yeah.
So that drives me nuts. And then looking about flatness of field, I want a field that is not flat, because that to me is texture. Like, when you walk outside, the lighting is not, it's not even everywhere. It's not lit perfectly everywhere. And that's what we're trying to duplicate all the time. So why are we trying to have the brightest fixture in the world? Because I don't get that. This fight for the brightest fixture, unless you are in 100-foot ceilings all the time. But we've forgotten what an intensity wheel is. Like, we don't use that anymore. It's everything is at full in bright blue, like everywhere all the time, especially in corporate. And it's like, there's something about intensity, guys. Like, you look at photos and the LEDs turn white everywhere because they're so bright that all the sensors in the camera get overexposed. Like, take a minute to dial the intensity down until the cameras look right. Like, if that's what we're trying to do. So you can tell I get very passionate about this, but it just drives me crazy how, like, everything is at full, everything's the brightest, everything has to be flat and boring. Yeah. Well, no, life's about texture. Light's about movement. Light is about all of those things. And that's what our shows should look like, so people want to be inside.
Yeah, it's the experience. It's a human thing.
It is the experience. Yeah, it is a human thing, for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of lights, there's another thing I saw on your site, and I was very eager to get to this part because I want to hear about this. You have UV light to fight against COVID.
Yes.
Okay, so because I've heard of this, I've seen some products. What little I know about UV light, that other than my water filter I had at my other house, UV light technically will kill you if you're exposed to it.
So that's not true.
Okay.
But it's half true. So and I've got a webinar I do with client that is about 50 minutes long. So if ever one day you want to dive more into that, more than happy to do that with you. But but basically, what we're selling is a product from Luxabel in Europe. They developed, basically during the pandemic, they saw an opportunity to use some of the technology that already exists to fight COVID. And in the early days, there was a lot of data. So I spent lots of calls with, engineers and scientists and that kind of stuff, explaining the technology and explaining how that all works. And it's an amazing technology, and it's quite safe, and it works super well. The problem is that the government of Canada, as much as we've asked 1 million times to approve that for distribution in Canada, they always said, we're too busy right now. We don't have time to look at it. But the reality is it's already implemented in buildings, in water supplies, all over the place. So, the first water treatment plant to use UV light as a way to sanitize water was established in the early 1900s in Paris, 1907, I think. So UV lights have been around for a long time. During the epidemic of polio in the 30s, 40s, 50s, UV lights were set up in front of the vent in schools so that as the air was being blown into the rooms, it would actually sterilize and break down the viruses. So basically, to make a long story short, we saw an opportunity for us to use our expertise in lighting to actually try to find a solution that could work for COVID. So what we did is we the lights. The light tube themselves are made by Philips, and they're rated, and they're at a very precise nanometer frequency. I think 265.3 or 253.5. I never remember. I always have to look at my notes, and you took me by surprise. But there's a frequency that is bang on to that is the right. It is the brightest UVC frequency to be able to sanitize viruses and spores and that kind of stuff. And what UV does is it basically breaks down the bond between, it breaks down the bond inside of the RNA or the DNA. So when you're saying it can kill human, it can cause cancer in human because that's what it does to your cells. Like when your cells get exposed, it's just like watching a welding machine, how it can damage your eyes. Mm-hmm. Well, a welding machine will generate UVC. On Earth, there is no UVC. The ozone layer prevents it all from coming through, so we don't get exposed to it down here. Mm-hmm. So the only way to get exposed to it is to generate it artificially. There is UVA and UVB, but no UVC. So, and UVA and UVB do have a little bit of sanitizing power, but maybe 5% of what UVC can do. And now people are working on far UVC, which is a UV that could be on all the time, even when you're in the space. And that it's a lower, it's again, a lower frequency. So a lower nanometer, and that frequency, like they're talking about being able to put that into airports and stuff where it's on 24 hours a day. The only problem is that because it is possible to be exposed to it all the time, it is not nearly as effective to disinfect space. But right now, our office yesterday, like every single room got disinfected with our UVC sanitizing unit. And we do have an air purifier in my office right now that runs 24 hours a day as well. And we just thought the technology was amazing. There was scientists from the Boston University that came up with the exact amount of exposure. So the amount of UV that needs to be exposed per square millimeter to be able to destroy the virus. So we know exactly what it takes to destroy all the different strain of COVID-19. And we just thought it was a fascinating product. We sold quite a fair bit of it, like a lot of it to individuals. And we had these little mini bar fridge that you could put microphones or VR glasses and stuff in there to disinfect them, and masks and all that. So we sold a fair amount of those as well. Oh. But when it was time to do big, we were talking to the Stampede, we were talking to a few of the large institutional buyers around here, and they needed to see something from the government saying like, hey, and the government never got around to generating that. And that's with us sending dozens of emails asking for it. I even met with MPs and MLA trying to put pressure because the data is there, the technology worked, there is proof to it. You can actually do a swab on the wall, like you can see like the bacterial load or the virus load prior to and after. Like you look under a microscope, you can see it. There's ways to quantify it, which these days everybody is using hand sanitizing lotion. But the secret that nobody talks about is that your hand has to be exposed to that alcohol for a minute if you want it to be effective. So people squirts it in their car, they do this, and then they're done. But 10 seconds is not enough to kill anything. So, you can use very harsh chemical on all your surface all the time, but you're not actually like sanitizing to the same level UV can do without any harsh chemical, without any of the smells and all that stuff. So for us, we thought it was a super exciting new technology that could revolutionize the world. Unfortunately, the government being what it was, they weren't buying in. And I did some talk on the radio. I was on talk radio, like here locally, and got interviewed by morning show hosts, like trying to get a little bit more information about that. And people were really excited. There was a good momentum, but we never got any buy-in. So,
Yeah, I guess I heard of it at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was wondering, what's going on with this. But yeah, I do understand that the whole government machine approving products is extremely slow and probably understaffed.
Yeah, like it was funny. I think this technology scares people a little bit because of
Mm.
what you said at the beginning, which is, like it kills people. And the products we're selling, like they have, motion sensors. So if you walk in the room, they shut down right away. They have audible alarm that just beep in the background to let you know that the thing is working before you walk in the room.
It's still
The
scary
motion,
though, because if there's a
well,
malfunction there, you're walking into a death trap.
you're not like because you could be exposed to a fair amount of it like without any consequences
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and the reality is UVC can be blocked by a t-shirt, so you don't need any protective gear. So if you're wearing glasses, like just even normal glasses like you're wearing right now, and you're wearing a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, like UVC will only touch where it can see your skin.
Okay.
And then it's not any different than watching a welder. The exposure problem is if you get exposed to it in high dose for long periods of time. So, which, if you walked in a room and that sensor didn't work and the machine was still working, by the time you'd go and disconnect it, you'd be exposed to it for less than a minute, and it would not affect you in a way that would change your life. So
Mm-hmm.
it might give you a little bit of a skin burn, possibly, maybe like a sunburn, possibly if you were there, but not any different than if you're welding, because when you're welding, you are actually generating UVC, and people weld with their shirts, like
Yeah.
short sleeves shirts in the summer, and they don't, it's not a problem. So,
Well, good to know.
yeah. So there you go. Things.
So, it's been a while, I guess. It's been, yeah,
Yeah,
we're over
like
an
a
hour
little bit
now.
over an hour. Holy geez.
That's good. Listen, in closing, first of all, I see. Last thing I noticed on your site is that you're always on the lookout for people to work with you. So,
We
what are
are.
your immediate needs now? If somebody is around and has the qualifications, what exactly do you need, and how do we reach you?
So basically, if you go on our website, that's a good way to reach us. Our phone number as well is there.
Hmm.
And my email is pierre@orangefrogproductions.ca. And you can reach me there as well. We are looking for everything, programmers to dimmer tech to technicians. Like I said, there is a real shortage of good lighting people in Alberta. I mean, there is people here, but they're busy and there's more work than can be handled. So I think if somebody wants to come and explore Western Canada and wants to see a little bit of a different, you know, part of the country, there's opportunity to come and work here. There's lots of freelance work, and there is some full-time opportunity as well. So for us, again, if I'm very much one of those guys that believe, and if you build it, they will come.
Hmm.
So if I find somebody very unique that I think would be a great fit for us, I would certainly invest in that because I think it's good for our company and it's good to have people that are talented here. And I think we're a small mom and pop shop, and we really we like the way we are run in the sense that we're this small group and we're a collective in lots of ways. You're not working for the Solotech, the Christie Lights of the world, where you're, I would assume one person part of the machine. I mean, I used to work
Yeah.
for both of those companies in my younger days. Here, you get to have a chance to have a voice, and you get to come and sit with the owner, come and sit across from me, and go, "Hey, I saw this cool thing. We should buy it, boss." And then maybe it happens, and people get to have a voice on all the design, and we work as a collective, not just in a vacuum. And so if you want to be part of something different and you want to be, like it's not about ego and it's not about if you're a rock star and it's all about you, then we're not the right place for you. But if you like being part of a team and you like being part of something, and you want to be part of an experience, and you want to be part of a company that has a really great reputation, and that really loves integrity and doing business where it makes a difference, and you are with like-minded people, then come here for sure. Like we've got room for you.
All right, so the word is out.
The word is out. Thank you so much for
Orangefrogproductions.ca.
that's it. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast today. Like it's taken way too long for us to connect. I'm glad we finally did that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I intend to be in your area for the next CITT thing going on. There's a
Yeah,
rendezvous
it's a
thing, I
big
believe.
one. Yeah. It's going to be a big one. We're hoping to have a booth too again this year. So we're going to be there for the Backstage Expo if they do one
Hmm.
again. So
That's cool.
Yeah. So we're excited about that. It's going to be great to see the design from all around the world too. Like, I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I can't wait to just go out and meet people. I mean, it's been so
Yeah.
long.
Yeah, for sure. No, I could not agree more. So yeah.
All
Well, I
right.
look forward. Maybe we can go for lunch or something.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Absolutely. That is
Cool.
noted. Pierre,
Awesome.
thank you so much.
Ben, merci beaucoup, Claude.
Ça fait plaisir. Ça fait plaisir. The Backstage Cowboys podcast is brought to you by AVL Media Group and Avolites, who make the best lighting consoles in the world. If you live in Canada, you now have access to the Avolites Academy online learning platform. The cost is $229, and that includes an editor Avo key delivered directly to your door. Head on over to BackstageCowboys.com and click on the Avolites Academy logo to get all the details.